still. And Fred, the images of people, oh, here we go, maybe down here. So here we go. In the days leading up to Election Day, obviously you want to maintain a good social distance. You want to do that anyway. Wear your mask. I mean, this is so important because what we have such a responsibility as poll workers to keep the voters safe, but to also keep our fellow poll workers safe. So knowing that you're going to be in a situation where you will be dealing with many people, that this should really be a focus for the next couple weeks. So wear your mask, avoid large groups, wash your hands more than ever. And if you have traveled or plan to travel out of Connecticut during the next 14 days, please let us know. Obviously, if you've come into contact with somebody who isn't well and might have COVID, please let us know. The important thing to remember here is that you do not want to hesitate to call us, even if it's at the very last minute. Fred and I have worked hard to have backup people that we can call on if you need to cancel at the last minute. Keeping everyone safe is the most important thing. So on Election Day, please take your temperature. If you have a fever, please call us. We will not be providing any food or beverages to minimize the sharing of them. And so pack everything that you need for your day, and we will be increasing everybody's salaries by $15 to cover this expense. When you arrive at the polling place, you should be wearing a mask. We have many additional masks. We particularly, Fred and I both really like the KN95 masks that you could use one of those. We've used them, both of us have used them for very long periods of time and find them to be, there we go. We have a demo with Fred in his mask. And you must wear your mask at all times in the polling places. This is for your safety, the safety of the poll workers, and the safety of the voters. And it's also for everybody's peace of mind. We want our polling place to be a place where everybody comes and feels that everything was done to keep the environment safe. If you have a problem with mask wearing, please let us know. We have disposable gloves. They can be worn. We have hand sanitizer. You can frequently sanitize your work area, and please take breaks. Leave the polling room, go outside. Everybody needs breaks. Even the official checkers, our most important position. You still need a break. The assistant registrars are trained and can fill in for you when you have a break. I wanted to quickly cover what we've done, some of the things we've done. So we created a new poll worker position called the COVID Safety Monitor. And this poll worker, their sole job is to keep the polling place as sanitized as possible. They'll be constantly sanitizing touch points such as doors, handles, surfaces, and more. And I didn't put there, but I should have put there, of course, they will be constantly sanitizing the voting booths, because that's a big touch area. There will be acrylic screens set up between you and the poll workers. Your fellow poll workers will not be right next to you. If you've done poll working before, you may be used to having somebody right next to you, but they will not be. The town has set up, has worked on layouts for all the polling places that keeps everybody nicely distanced. Voters are not required to use privacy booths and privacy folders. They may think that they're supposed to, but it's optional. So we are trying to educate voters to understand it is optional. They could bring a book or a clipboard in with them and write against that. And this will minimize lines for privacy booths and minimize use of the booths, which helps from a sanitation point of view. So we have all the gear that I mentioned, and here we are. If you have any questions about this, please do not hesitate to call us. And now I think Fred's going to start with the regular class.
Okay.
So now I am stopped sharing. There we go. Oh, wonderful.
All right, great. I'm going to start sharing. 30 participants. That's great.
It is great.
Okay. Okay. I won't do it this way because I use two monitors and it messes it up. So I'll go back and do it different way. Sorry. All right. All right. So everyone, thank you and welcome to Official Checker training. So we have lots of training classes for different positions, but this is admittedly the most critical position in the polling place because it is the official record of the election, who actually showed up to vote. So you are trained separately in this 1 hour class. We usually say, but things have gotten better, that there's lots of counting to do before voting starts and after voting ends, but technology has helped us with that, as we'll show you. We're going to review the basic scenarios of the kinds of folks who are going to pass by you, whether it be a standard checkoff or an inactive voter, someone who's transferring between districts, provisional ballots, and challenge ballots. So I want to point out a couple of things to you beforehand. If you go to the Town of Greenwich website and you type in greenwichct.gov/vote, you'll get to our page. And you will see a section, I want to work at the polls. And from there, you'll see poll worker training materials, okay? You will find, this is where the recording of this meeting will appear, okay? And you also will find a copy of Mary's presentation, say poll worker instructions, as well as my presentation right now, and also a couple of important worksheets that we're going to be looking at and some notes, okay? So there'll be a set of instructions which you can print out that remind you of certain things, and there'll also be a copy of this worksheet, okay? As well as the documents that we're going to show you today. So we'll get that off the screen. So sitting next to you, on one side of you will be an ID checker. Their job is to basically help speed the process along, which is even more important these days, by basically asking voters to be prepared and get out their ID. And if they don't have ID, this is the point in time at which they can be directed off to see the moderator, who can have them sign an affidavit. Then of course comes you, so ID checker, and then you, and then there is what we call an unofficial checker or an e-poll book checker. They are trained separately. I just did one of those trainings downstairs live in the IT training room. They have complete voter lists on their computers. So that can be useful in a primary. This is not a primary, or it could be sometimes useful if a voter can't be found on the list. Now, it is not the job of you and the unofficial checker to research independently, when a voter is not found on the list. But I did want to let you know that, and the moderator know, that they do have that search capability, and they can help related to that if someone can't be found and you need to figure out what district they're supposed to be in, or what district you need to call if they need to be transferred. But your book is basically going to look like this: pages and pages of streets, street numbers, and names. It will not have party affiliation. Okay, this book was also used as an example for a primary. Okay, and so obviously, as a reminder, in the primary, you know, you want to make sure people are in the right line. Your book will not have party affiliation. Now, I like to, at this point, look at this page and help people understand, because as I like to say, by the time you're done, your book looks like it has hieroglyphics written in it, okay? And that's because we ask you to put numbers in all these different corners and add them up, etc. All of that to help speed the process along at the end of the night, okay? But conceptually, I like to review what it is we're asking you to put in those corners, what they mean, not just write this here, write this there. So in the upper left-hand corner of the page, we ask you to write the number of names found on the page. That's the number of eligible voters, okay? Or as I like to say, the number of people who are capable of coming to our party. On the right-hand side, in the upper right, are the number of absentee voters. Those are the folks who they went to somebody else's party, but they cast their vote, okay? In the lower left are the number of voters who are still eligible to come because they were invited, they're up here, they're eligible, but we've subtracted out the number of absentee voters. Okay, and we're going to go through this with real numbers in a second. And finally, down here at the end of the night, the number of in-person votes cast. Because at the end of the night, it's super important when we look at the tabulator, and the tabulator says that 2,955 people voted in District 12, that the three checkers show 2,953 checkoffs, okay? If they don't, and they show, say, 2,800, and there's 150 extra ballots, we're all in trouble, okay? So we want to avoid that by keeping as accurate a count as we can. Now, good news for those of you who've worked the last few elections. We now have a computer program that's been upgraded and will actually print some of those numbers in the book for you at the start of the day. So you no longer have to get there at 5:15 and immediately start counting how many people are on each page, okay? And yes, you can trust these numbers, okay? I have to tell you, if you come to me and you say the numbers are off, it's probably human error, not computer error. We've done a lot of spot checking with this, okay? So at the start of the day, it's automatically going to show you the number of people on the page and the number of red A's which have been pre-marked. You don't have to count those up either, okay? So now, what happens during the day? So during the day, as time goes on, you're going to be making different marks and abbreviations in your book. You're going to be writing people's names in. You're going to be crossing names out. You're going to be deleting names. And these numbers in the corners are going to change during that process, okay? And so by the end of the day, your page will look something like this, except obviously in a presidential election, you're going to have a whole lot more crossouts, okay? So let's go through the standard visitors that you're going to have on election day. So the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to have people who come in and they appropriately announce their street and their street number and their name, okay? So they're going to say they live on Old Kings Highway and they live at number 19 and their name is Sarah Elk, okay? They're going to have, you know, they're going to have shown their ID to the ID checker, okay? And at this point, you're going to be sort of, you know, observing this, but focusing on the voter in front of you, and you're going to cross them out, okay? So And you're probably going to wind up doing that in each of the books somewhere, depending upon the size of the book, et cetera, between 600 and 900 times during the day. Okay, that's the majority of what you're going to be doing. Okay, but you're also going to have people who are going to not appear in the book. And so they're going to have shown their ID. And now when they get to you, they're going to not appear in your book. And you're going to say, you don't appear in the book. You're going to need to go home. No, you do not say you need to go home. That is not what you say. What you say is, would you kindly see the moderator? They'll help locate your record. Okay. And the moderator has a bunch of different tools, and they will find that voter. And most likely that voter is an inactive voter. Okay. And I never know what color we print these things. And that voter will appear on a yellow list that the moderator has. They will need to fill out a new voter registration card. In a primary, they would have to select the same party. You don't have to worry about that. Okay, but what will happen is the moderator will now come and they will tell you to write the person's name in the book. They have been restored. Their voting rights have been restored from inactive to active. Okay. So you simply write their name in. And of course, if they're there in front of you and they now vote, you would cross their name off. I'm not going to cross this voter off in this case, in this example, because we're going to use it for a different reason later on. But again, if you write somebody in because they've been restored as inactive in front of you, go ahead and cross them off. So, and of course, the electronic checker next to you has their own process for restoring a voter. I want to just point out while we're doing this that everyone needs to have patience, because not only will people be masked, but there will, besides the mask making it hard to hear, the acrylic shield in front of you also makes it hard to hear. Okay. So voters, we're putting decals to ask them to speak clearly and loudly and enunciate. If you are at all concerned about your own hearing, please speak up and let us know. We have other positions that don't require having to do this. The other thing is that both for COVID purposes, and just because it's really what the rules say, you should not be taking and this is not a should not, do not take the ID of the voter, okay? We are telling the voters to put the ID up against the plastic plexiglass shield, okay? But you should not be taking it and examining it. If you need to go and get the ID like this may not be the position for you anymore, okay? So please think about that if that is a concern, okay? You should be listening for it. It should not be a situation. We got a raised hand. Oh no, how do I deal with that? Let's see here.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead and shout out your question.
Okay, when I was there for the primary, the person wasn't next to me who, I did all that checking and everything. This
That's
time you
correct.
said there's a person that's doing the checking first.
The person is making certain that that the person has valid ID and the
Right.
person will announce their name. Okay.
So we don't have to check the ID, right?
You don't, but again, most likely that voter will have the ID out and you may be looking at it simply as a double check for verifying against what you're hearing. Okay. But you're right.
Hi, Fred.
Primary, okay, because voters are naturally used to that. They're naturally used to just kind of showing the thing, because in most cases it's easier than repeating themselves over and over again. Because remember, you're not going to be sitting right next to the other people. You're going to be sitting at your own 6-foot table,
Right.
separate from them. So the voters are going to have to speak more, okay, and we're going to have to listen intently. Okay, so
Hey, Fred.
Jennifer, you had a question?
Sorry, just one question. previous election, there was a little hole that people would slide their ID through. Is that going to be blocked off?
The hole will not be blocked off, but there will be a decal that says to the voter, hold up your ID to the plexiglass. Do not.
Can we block it off if it's there, if it's not blocked?
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely. You want to bring a book or something to put up against it or whatever, by all means. Or heck, there's going to be a lot of tape floating around the place. If you want to put a little painter's tape on it, whatever.
Okay.
Just make sure that you don't put the sticky side out and collect a lot of IDs during the day. All right. So, yeah, but absolutely, you're welcome to do that. Okay, so again, I wanted to mention voters need to speak loudly, and hopefully we'll have those decals on the acrylic shield. Should be good. So we've spoken about restoring a voter. The next most common thing that happens in the polling place is we transfer a voter. Okay, so what usually happens is voters lived in town, they know they're registered in town, they know they're eligible to vote. But they moved from Chickahominy to North Mianus. And they know everybody in North Mianus votes in North Mianus School. And everybody in Old Greenwich votes at Old Greenwich School. So they go just where their neighbors are going to North Mianus School and say, hi, I'm here, but I used to live in Chickahominy. So they're not going to be on your list. Okay. Now, hopefully they either immediately went to the moderator, or maybe they're, going to get to you. They're not on the list. And then they're going to say, oh, I guess I'm not on the list because I moved and didn't tell anybody. So now what happens is there is a procedure. The moderator will call the old polling place to verify the voter has not voted. Okay. They will instruct, and once they have verified that, in the new polling place, you will write the person's name in the book and cross it out, and the electronic checker will go through their process to also check off the person. At the old polling place where they receive the call, they will also have to make a mark next to the person's name, but they do not cross the voter off. They write DEL next to the voter's name, okay? And that indicates the voter has been deleted. Now, let me point out that as you're doing these things during the day, you may need to adjust the numbers in those corners that we talked about, okay? So you can see we've already done a few things on this page here. We have written in Joan Smith. So now we've got one more person eligible to vote, so we added a +1. We have deleted Priscilla Stern. Do you want me to, Marissa, do you want me to make this a little larger? See if I can?
Oh, no. That's fine, thanks.
Yeah, I can't really. Yeah, I don't know if I can make it that much larger.
No, that's okay, Fred, that's fine.
Maybe a little. Okay. So you've deleted Priscilla, so you've subtracted 1. You started off the day with 3 red A's. Those were pre-printed in your book. During the day, we're going to send you lists of additional voters who voted by absentee ballot. You'll mark blue A's next to their names, okay? And you will add them in as having voted by absentee ballot as well. And down here, you'll be taking all of that data and making a running total. So again, we started off the day with 61 voters minus 3 absentees was where we got the original 58. We had 2 additional absentees. So that means 2 less people who can come vote by machine. We added a voter, the +1, and we subtracted a voter. So that's how we arrived at these numbers, okay? So when you transfer a voter, you're either going to be writing somebody in if you're in the new polling place, or you're going to be deleting somebody. So those 3 things, cross-offs, restoration from inactive, and transfer represent 99.5%, if not more, of the things that you are going to see on election day. There's only a couple of other special cases that we need to review. Okay. The first, since this is a federal election, is something called a provisional ballot. Okay. A provisional ballot is offered to a voter who is not on the active list, but is insistent that they have registered to vote. Now, that person could solve their issue and be assured that their vote will count if they go down to EDR, election day registration, and re-register on election day. But if for some reason they don't want to do that, they can ask for and be provided a provisional ballot. Okay? It can also be used if a voter is challenged by somebody in the polling place. Okay? And it involves basically the moderator providing a special envelope and a provisional ballot, which has only the federal races. The voter votes it, it gets sealed, and the moderators have 6 days to make a determination as to whether or not to keep that ballot. I don't want to spend too much time in the mechanics of it. What's important for what you're doing is that the official checker does not cross the name off. They mark PB next to the voter's name. Okay. They also don't make any adjustments related to eligibility. All they're doing is marking PB. And again, this is on, if you remember, I went to the town website and I showed you there was an official checker sheet, instructions. There's reminders on all of these items there if you download those pages, which I recommend. Okay.
Hey, Fred,
Yes.
just a quick question about that. I don't think I followed that. The person is on the sheet, and why are they not being?
Oh, that's a great, yes, that's a great question. So you're right. I get this question every time because the example I use isn't indicative of the situation. So it could also be a situation where for some reason, okay, this person has been challenged, okay, because somebody has said they're not the person who they say they are. There are other mechanisms by which somebody can be challenged. They can be challenged because someone says you no longer live in this district. They can be challenged because somebody says you are not that person. You are Fred DiCaro Jr., not Fred DiCaro III. There are other reasons why someone can be challenged and offered a provisional. And in those cases, that name would appear there. We actually had a case a few years ago where we had a challenge issued. Somebody came into a polling place. Their brother was on the ballot, a well-known figure. They wanted to cast a vote for their brother, but they had moved to Stanford 2 months ago. One of the poll workers identified this, said to the person, look, you moved, the new people moved into your house, you know, I need to challenge you. They did not ask for a provisional ballot, nor were they, you know, they simply walked out because they knew they were in the wrong. But there are cases where someone who's being challenged may have very good grounds to appeal that, and they will ask for a provisional ballot. Did I answer the question?
Yes, you did. Thank you. So I think I understand that if the person just hasn't registered to vote at all or was removed from these roles, then we'll write their name in, put PB next to it, and don't cross it out.
Yeah, I don't even know if you need to write their, I mean, you can write their name in, that's fine, right? But in most cases, you know, you'll only need to write it in for those challenge cases, not for the situation where they're not in the book at all. But
Okay,
you'll see,
thanks.
and ideally, if somebody is not registered and they're not in any of these things, they'll solve their problem the easy way, which is they'll use election day registration, register, and they'll have no doubt their vote will be counted. So a provisional ballot is asked for by the voter, okay? And there is another kind of ballot which is offered by the moderator if there is a challenge. It is called a challenge ballot, and it is available in every election, and it is essentially basically a neighbor challenging a neighbor situation. Grounds for a challenge shall not be unreasonable, and there are penalties for people who make unreasonable challenges, I would point out. But in generally, the idea is the person is not who they claim, they've been disenfranchised for a felony and they haven't completed their sentence, or they have a lack of bona fide residence in the district. Okay, Monique, I see your hand was raised. I'll get to you in just a second. So in these cases, the voter is on the voter list. And what happens is if someone challenges, the moderator has to make a decision as to whether the voter can simply vote regularly, whether the challenge has any validity, or if the voter will be offered a challenge ballot. Okay, now I want to point out that I don't believe in my 12 years I've ever seen a challenge ballot. Okay, usually, even when we have challenged folks, like here in our office, we've sent notes to the polling place saying this voter should be challenged. Okay, there's either been a reasonable explanation or that person realizes there's a problem and they walk out the door. They do not sit there with a challenge ballot.
Hope so.
But a person certainly will be offered that by the moderator. So there was a question.
Yeah, I have a question about provisional ballots. If a person requested an absentee ballot originally, but then comes to the polling place and decides they want to vote in person instead, would they be requesting a provisional ballot in that case?
No. So if they come to the polling place and there's no A next to their name, that means the town clerk has not yet received their provisional or their ballot. And so they are eligible to vote. However, I would point out that that would be a case where the voter has applied for a ballot and has not used the ballot. Okay, and we're going to see that in this election because there are many people applying for absentee ballots and they're not using them. Now, there's no A next to their name, and those people are instructed. We actually have signs we're putting up outside the polling place. Do not bring your absentee ballot inside, okay? We don't want them mixed in with the other ballots. If you haven't voted it, please come in and vote. If, however, that person has already voted, they've dropped it in the box, or they've put it in the mail, and they come in, one or two things will happen. Either there'll be an A next to their name, in which case they'll be told they cannot vote, or there'll be no A, and they'll be allowed to vote. But if we then get an absentee ballot from them, they will be charged for double voting, okay? So obviously, you only want to cast one ballot, okay? And if anybody who has an absentee ballot is concerned about the mails, there are right now available 2 drop boxes that the ballots can be placed in. One is in a super secure location, literally in the lobby of the police station. The other is right outside of town hall. They're open 24/7. They're under video surveillance. They're super secure, and you don't need to use the mails. Getting back to challenge ballots just for a second. So if for some reason a challenge ballot was issued by the moderator, and again, a very, very rare occurrence, okay, you as the official checker, okay, would mark CB next to the voter's name, but again, you do not cross the voter off. So in this case, this voter was challenged. We wrote CB, but we didn't make any of those adjustments anywhere else on the page. Okay. So now the day goes on, more people come in, they get crossed off. Okay. So now let's pretend this is the end of the day. So at the end of the day, okay, you're going to need to fill out a worksheet at the end of your book that's going to require you to tell us how many people were eligible to vote, how many people were eligible to, or how many people voted by absentee, how many people were eligible to vote by machine, and how many people actually voted by machine. And that represents these four corners, okay? That's what we've been trying to keep track of all day. So what happens is you'll tally these numbers up. I just have down here column 2 and column 1 and column 2, because if you're counting a whole column of cross-offs, it's much easier to sum this column and put a little notation here, and then sum this one and add them together, than it is to try and keep track. Because remember, you're going to be doing this over and over again, page by page. So take those numbers, and again, here's the concept of what they represent, and here's the numbers at the end. And there'll be a page, okay? Well, there'll be a couple of pages. First of all, there'll be a page that looks like this at the end of your worksheet, okay? At the end of your book, okay? It'll say the total number of names in your official checker book. That'll be pre-filled. Sorry for the overage here. And on that page we were looking at, it was 61. You will be asked, how many names did you add to your book? Now, you'll remember that in this particular case, we wrote in Joan Smith's name, so we added 1. I'll be going over in a moment. There's some other lists we'll be providing you during the day, and you'll actually be adding many more. You'll be adding 10, 15 voters, if not more, during the day, okay? So you would put that number in. How many names did you delete from your book? Those were the number of DELs when people were transferred out. You remember we had 1 of those. And so how many names in your book after the polls closed? Well, in this particular case, the math is easy. We started with 61, we added 1, we subtracted 1, we're still at 61. How many absentee ballots in your book? And how many strike-throughs? And you'll recall we had 5 absentee voters, 1, 2, 3 reds and 2 blues. The reds are the pre-printed, the blues are the ones you add during the day, and we had 5 strikeouts. So this information, okay, represents the data that we need to reconcile for the polling place and for the town, and have to report up to the state. Because at the end of the night, we're asked how many people were checked off as having voted. And let's say that number in the town is 30,000. And then they'll say, and how many ballots did you count? And that number should also be 30,000, okay? If that number's 31,000, there's something wrong. Why did we lose track of 1,000 people? So it's important that you maintain your concentration through this process to make sure everybody who passes in front of you is appropriately checked off. Now, I want to show you a couple of other things. The first thing is, certainly, you're going to be making marks, etc. But, at the end of the night, it is a lot to go and check all of those cross-offs and count those. You'll also have in the back of your book, and you can tear it out, a tally sheet. If you want, as you cross someone off, you can make a tally sheet mark, and you could total that up as the day goes on. So at the end of the day, you're going to know automatically how many people were crossed off. And the good thing about the tally sheet is the ID checker next to you has a tally sheet, and the ballot clerk down at the end of the line from you has a tally sheet, and the computer checker has an equivalent. So as the day goes on, the moderator is going to stop every hour or so and say, okay, ballot clerk, how many ballots have you given out this hour? ID checker, how many people passed by you? Official checker, how many people did you check off? Ideally, you're in sync, okay, as you move through the day with that. If you're not, we'll give you some tips on that in a moment. So someone is going to, or we used to designate somebody as what we called the recap clerk, and we gave them $25 extra to be the official checker who at the end of the night took this information from each of the books and filled it out on this official checker's certificate, which is actually delivered back to us on election night as part of what's called the moderator return. What we've done now is, the last couple of years, we've given everybody that $25, and we expect all of the official checkers to work together. We may ask one person to be the recap clerk, but we ask all of you to stick around and make sure that these numbers balance. And the certificate is pretty easy to fill out. You simply take the numbers from whatever was in those worksheets, and we literally tell you what line of the worksheet, and you sum them based on the number of books you have. Now, no polling place is going to have, well, I take that back. Some polling places will have 2 books for a voting district, and some will have 3. There may be more lines because of what we call split districts, but there'll either be 2 or 3 books that match together with the right streets, okay? So those numbers will be added up here. And again, you will see total number of names checked on the official checklist as having voted in person, B, 1634. That number should match the tabulator and the number of ballots that went through, okay? So if that number is off by 1 or 2, that's human error. We totally get it. We'd love for you to spend a few minutes trying to reconcile it, but it's hard to find 1 or 2, okay? We get it. If your numbers are off 5, 10, 15, 20, it's important to go back and bring that number down. So one of the ways that you can do that is you have this electronic checker next to you. The electronic checker has a report. Okay, they're all taught how to generate this report. And the report is called the Who Voted report. And what it does is on their screen, it makes a page that looks just like your book, but only shows the people who have been checked off. So very quickly, you could sit there with them and you could say, okay, or they could say, I have 2 people checked off on Anderson Road. And you can look and say, oh, I have 2. I have 2 people on Arch Street. I have 3 people on Benedict Court. I have 5 people on Bowling Place. Wait, I only have 4 people on Bowling Place. Okay, who are you missing? And that's a way for you to quickly get through and reconcile. You don't have to go name by name, but if you simply count up street by street, okay, that's a way for you to help reconcile if you are missing individuals. So that's
Fred?
key. Yes.
Just in that example, you would reconcile by crossing the name off to indicate that the person voted, even though you hadn't done so earlier in the day?
Well, if, you know, again, if you're certain the person did not vote, okay, we don't want you to be falsifying their record. But if it's possible that you made an error and you have other people next to you, the ID checker, okay, and the ballot clerk, and they show a lower number, or excuse me, rather a higher number than you, and it makes logical sense, then yes, I would cross the person off. Okay.
Thank you.
If however, and we've had situations where people disagree related to the numbers, that's okay. If they're off 1 or 2, as we said, we're not asking people to in any way, you know, do something that's beyond their recollection. But you make an excellent point, and one of the keys related to that is you should not be waiting until the end of the night to do that kind of reconciliation, okay? You have the opportunity when the line is stopped for a minute to check and see, and you should see if at the end of an hour, okay, if you're off by, you know, 1, okay, you can start working with the checker related to that, etc. If you're off by 4 or 5, we may need to, you may need to talk to the moderator, but you really shouldn't get to that point if you're talking with the people next to you and you're confirming. And in some polling places, there's almost like a cadence that goes on, after a while, the ID checker will say, all right, that was person number 25 this hour. And, if you have a checker thing, if you're using a checker, you say, yep, 25, and so on down the list. Okay. So don't wait till the end of the day to see that you have that kind of a difference. Okay. So on the morning of the election, you're going to get some additional papers. You're going to get your checker book, and your checker book will have these tally sheets that I mentioned in the back. And they will also have a couple of other documents. The first is, you won't see this because they will be 18. Okay, you won't see this, but you'll see a document that looks similar to this that will come to you, and it will say Supplemental List. And it won't have reasons on it. It'll simply have the names and the addresses of individuals and their street, their street. These are folks who registered to vote between the time when we printed the books, okay, and election day. Now, usually we print the books 3, 4, 5 days before election day. This year, we're printing them the morning before election day. So the number of these supplemental voters, okay, should be very low, okay? Because the only people who can come the day before the election are people who literally have moved into town in the last week, or people in the military, okay? So otherwise, they either have already registered or they're gonna go to election day registration. But your moderator may give you this supplemental list. When they do, I advise you not to just put the list in the back of the book, and then if somebody doesn't show up, say, oh, maybe they're on that supplemental. Write their names in the morning, okay? That's what we were doing here. That's why I said I was leaving Joan Smith before. Write the names in so that if that voter shows up, you're ready for them, you're prepared, and they have a good voting experience. Don't be flipping to say, maybe they're on the supplemental list. Heck, I don't even remember if there was a supplemental list, okay? If you're given extra names in the morning, write them in the book. And what happens is I email those names to the moderators the night before, okay? But it'll be in a format like this. It's not like I just send them, hey, write John Smith in an email, okay?
Sorry, if you write their name in, then you also add them in the corners, right?
Yes, that's correct. And that's why if you remember back to the worksheet, I mentioned include the names on the supplemental list. Okay, so you're going to want to add, because you added those to your book. 18-year-olds is for the primary, because primary voters are not going to show, but they are eligible. So that's something for the primary. But this is what you're going to see on the worksheet itself when you get it. Okay, a reminder to write those in. Okay, so let's see here. I'm looking through all the pages we went through. Okay, so 4 of you are going to have someone come to your line, assuming they all vote, and these folks are going to have a special yellow card issued to them by the Secretary of the State's office. And they are folks who are in an address confidentiality program. They have to come to the right polling place, but they never announce their street. They don't have to get in the right line representing the street where they live, okay? Okay, so that they can do whatever necessary to, obfuscate their address. So what happens is, for 4 of you, okay, you will find in the back of your book, and I would look for it in that morning, just so you know, okay, a page that says address suppressed. Let me see if I have one in this this other book I have here. Yes, okay. So this is a voter in town whose address is suppressed, okay? So they do not show any ID besides the address confidentiality card, okay? Their identity, they have to announce who they are, but they do not have to show anything. They'll be in the back of the book, okay? You would cross them out just like any other voter, and they would move through the line, okay? And the computer checker next to you, they are also trained. There's a special street called address suppressed that also shows them, those particular folks. So as I said, there's literally 4 of these right now in the town of Greenwich. So 4 of you will probably see it. The rest of you just be aware of it, because I don't know and I'm not telling you where the 4 are. Okay. All right. So it's the end of the night. You have one thing we want to point out is you want to sign your book. Okay. And you'll also only the recap clerk, only one person will have to sign the checker certificate. At that point, those books do come back to us. We do need to make sure all of the paperwork is signed that night. If your book is not signed, we will call you up. We will ask you to come down here to town hall. No one wants to do that. You've had a long day, so do remember to sign it before the evening ends. You can even, since you're the only person who is going to be basically working with your book, it's not a split shift, feel free to sign it in the morning. But let's talk about other people. So you will need to take bathroom breaks, etc. So we will need to have the assistant registrar or someone else help out, because we cannot stop the process of voting when you go to lunch, etc. So we do try and make sure that these are folks who have also at one point been official checkers or understand the process, right? But my guess is, and what I have found is that most people who are official checkers take very quick lunch and dinner breaks, because it's a kind of a pain in the neck if you have to try and reconcile it and somebody else has been using your book, right? And you're not 100% sure related to it. The other thing is there should be, and I saw my friend Tony Zegras here, I saw her picture here on my screen and it reminded me of this. We put little tabs, okay, in the goodie totes. Okay, she brought her own, I think, but we brought these little tabs that are kind of like, you know, to tell where people have to do a signature, etc. You're welcome to take some of those tabs and put them on pages on the side of the book and write, say, the street, you know, the street initials, right? M or K or whatever, so you can flip through that book more quickly, okay? We obviously don't do that for you because, you know, the books are printed by the town print shop, but we will have those and you can feel free to do that to make your life easier when you're flipping through. Tony had an amazing set of those tabs when I saw her book for the primary. So, okay, so I that's it as far as I'm concerned for what we're gonna, you know, be teaching you today. Now, if you have additional questions, okay, we will have a Q&A session. I believe it's next week. I don't remember the exact date, but it was in your hiring letters, or send Mary and I a note and we'll let you know when that is. So whatever time it starts, we'll be on when it starts and we'll go until the questions end. But we won't just be hanging around. If there's nobody there, like let's say it starts at 7, if there's nobody, if we're done at 7:15, right? At 7:15, we hang up. So do come at the beginning if you have questions. This training session is also being recorded and will be posted to YouTube. Okay, and so you can also look at it there. We'll be sending out to you the link So you can review it if you have any other questions. And you can always find that stuff as soon as it's posted by going to our website. And as I mentioned, going to the poll worker training materials section, and then you'll see the recordings of recent trainings.
So the Q&A for this is a week from today, October 27th at 7 o'clock.
There you go.
No question tonight then, right, Fred and Mary?
Wait, I'm sorry, what was that, Marissa?
Said no question tonight then.
No, I will happily take your questions tonight.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay.
If someone English isn't their primary language, is there a specific line that they go in or that kind of thing?
No, some of the polling places where we have a population that may speak a second language, primarily Spanish, Mary and I have hired poll workers that also speak that language, but they're not in a specific position. So
Okay.
if someone comes in, and they're having, difficulty, and certainly if you see someone having difficulty and you speak the language,
Mhm.
feel free to work with them,
Okay.
right? But, obviously you need to do, what you're there for also. And as an official checker, you're not going to want to be getting up too often for that.
Okay. So if someone were to come to my line and there was like a language issue, it would just be someone else in the group, another worker. That would
Or yes, or it may in fact be somebody in another, like an ID checker in another row, or a ballot clerk who may be asked to do some translation.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
When is it appropriate for checkers to do their own voting during the context of the day?
So if you, if that is your polling place, then you can on any of your breaks. If it is not your polling place, then you should be voting by absentee. So it's getting kind of close to the time if you're going to mail in an absentee ballot. What I would suggest is contacting the town clerk's office and seeing if they have Saturday hours, or if you can come during the week. You do not need an appointment now from 8 to 1. You can either bring a pre-filled application or filled one out right then and there. They will generate the absentee ballot for you, and you can vote it right then and there. But you're not to leave your polling place to vote during the day. And long before COVID, being a poll worker is one of the 6 acceptable excuses for an absentee ballot.
Well, Fred, we're assuming that we're going to get a lot of absentee ballots during the day.
Well, so the good news is that so for example, there are 15,000 absentee ballots that have been issued. There are 9,000 of those ballots that have already come back.
Oh.
Every one of those ballots will already have been marked in the book. And because we're waiting so long to print the book, basically every ballot the town clerk has received through Sunday night before the election will be marked in your book. So the only ones you really need to focus on are ballots that have come in on Monday. So while there may be still a decent number, okay, it's not going to be overwhelming. We purposely have made arrangements with the print shop at the Board of Ed to print the books much later than normal.
Can you just restate what happens if somebody asks for an absentee ballot and then they come in to vote? So if they've already sent it in, it will be marked. But if it's not marked, what do you do? And then you just let them vote?
They can vote. Absolutely.
If they have not dropped their ballot into the ballot box or put it in the mail, if they've done either one of those things, whether or not it shows as being received by the town clerk, they may not vote at the polls.
We wouldn't know that, right?
What?
We wouldn't know that.
We wouldn't know that, but right, that's correct. It's up to the voter. So the person would only be caught after the fact. So, but we have signs that we're putting up outside the polling place that say, if you have mailed or dropped off your ballot, you have voted.
But the other thing is that it won't be that they will have an opportunity to vote twice. Because if we see that they voted at the polls, let me step back. Any ballot that arrives in town hall at the town clerk's on election day will not be counted on election day. All of those absentee ballots will be counted the next day. So we will be looking in all of your official checker books to see whether those absentee ballots that we receive on election day, whether those people have voted. And if they voted, obviously their absentee ballot will not be voted.
Right, so their ballot, they won't get 2 ballots counted, but they will have voted twice or made the attempt, and they will be reported to the State Elections Enforcement Commission.
Now, one more question, Fred. On August 11th election, I found it hard to be able to keep up with the tally when the person comes in just about near the hour. You know what I mean? Close to the hour. Like if somebody came in like 2 or 3 minutes before 9 o'clock, and then you go and tally and you don't remember if it's 9 o'clock or
So
the next,
you shouldn't be,
hour.
it's not so important that the tally occur at the hour. It's important that the tally occur when the moderator stops the line for a moment, okay, to give you all a time to do it simultaneously. Okay, so that could be in one line, that could be at 8:55, and it could be at the next line over at 8:57. Right now, the moderator should be looking to see how many people are out with ballots and how many, and haven't given to the tabulator, and they should be making these observations, okay, so that they can get as accurate a number as they can. But you shouldn't be saying, okay, it's 9 o'clock and doing it independently. It should be done in conjunction with everybody in the row at the same time. And yes, the moderator should, for a few seconds, stop the line. That's okay. Now, if that's not what's happening, let us know. But I will also, now that you've mentioned it, point that out in moderator training on Saturday.
Good. That it would help, I think.
Yes, and also remember, at the primary, you were super checkers. You were doing the ID, you were doing the ballot, you were handing out the ballots, and you were checking off voters. So you're just going to have the one job at this election.
And the tally sheet is a tally of all transactions or just voting?
Just people who have been crossed off as having voted.
Okay.
Fred,
Yes.
just a quick comment on for the primary with the absentee ballots that came in overnight, and we had them on the supposedly on a printout.
Yeah.
Our moderator had trouble getting a printout, and I was doing it with her cell phone, and the book was just a mess because I ended up putting in Republicans and Democrats. And so I think when you do the training, if you could stress that they really need to have a printout of the absentee voters.
Yeah, so I think what may have happened, and that might have been my fault, is that someone came into my office and I was too polite, and I got confused when I made up the packets of what went where, and the wrong packet went to the wrong district. And so I think they might have tried to solve that by calling each other, et cetera. But the second time around, later in the day, because we did do it a couple of times, I did.
Yes, no, the packet that we got later in the day was lovely, it was fine.
Yes, that's what happened is I kicked the guy out of my office
later.
later in the day and said, I have to concentrate. And I made sure everybody got the right stuff. Yes.
Okay, if you could also leave more room in the book itself for when we need to add voters, I mean, there's no room there.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're writing up the side of the book. I mean, it's,
Thank you.
give us
Yeah.
Yeah,
one
so-
line for each street would be great.
So that's a good point. I don't know that I can get that fixed before the election. So the book is, we either use the state system, which prints out the book like that, or we are now using a separate system which emulates that. But in either case, that's how it does it. I mean, I can have the new system we're using adjusted, but I'm afraid to have any programming changes done so close to the election. So
Okay.
I think we're going to have to live with it as it is, and I apologize.
Right, small.
Yeah, right. Right, Miss King, right.
And, one more thing, I see you have a lot of new faces that have joined
Yes,
to work the polls. Bring a pillow.
For the
very good
chair,
Bring a
advice.
pillow. It's a long day.
for the
Very
chair.
good advice.
Mm.
We should put that in. Mary, you need a slide on that in the COVID safety.
Right, bring a pillow. Thank you.
Yeah, and
Is
that's
that for naps or for sitting?
No,
No
no,
napping.
Sitting.
I don't think there'll be much napping this election.
Hey, Fred, I don't think I might have missed something, but are there two official checkers, and are they doing different streets, or are they both doing the same thing? I didn't follow
Right.
that
So
part.
in a polling place, the lines are divided so that by street, so that no line has more than a certain number of voters on it. So yes, so what happens is there'll be a checker for streets A through K. And in a big polling place, it might be, in smaller ones, it'll be like A to M and N to Z. But in larger ones, it may be A to K, K to P, and then, R to Z, something like that. So yes, there are multiple checkers for streets, but voters have to go to the street that they live on. But at the end of the night, all the ballots from all those streets and all those lines all go in the same tabulator.
Got it. Thank you. Oh, I have one more while I have the floor. I mean, you do see in the news talk about, people that want to disrupt the election and in polling places. And is there any sort of protocol around that?
Sure, the moderator, there is a section of the general statutes, which the moderators are reminded of, which says they have the absolute control of maintaining a free and fair election and a constant flow of voters. So if there is any disruption of the polling place, they immediately can call and a police officer can escort that person out of the polling place. And of course, there is a 75-foot demarcation, a radius from all of the entrance doors to the polling place, in which there is no campaigning, no politicking, and basically only voters or people assisting voters and children, sometimes voters bring their children, should be coming into the polling place. I don't know that we want to go into it too much, but there are the rules on clothing have been kind of loosened. So you could see somebody who, so long as it doesn't specifically have the candidate's name or image on it, you could see somebody with a logo or a well-known phrase for a candidate, like on their hat, for instance. That, because of some Supreme Court rulings, has been indicated that it's allowed. But our thought with those voters is similar to our thought with voters who refuse a mask. Get them in and out as quickly as possible.
Hi, I have a question about absentee ballots. So you mentioned that we'd be marking new absentee ballots in blue on the sheet. So
Yes.
So how does that work during the beginning of the day? Do we get a stack that we count or?
No. So what happens is any ballots which have been received by the town clerk, basically since the books were printed, are generated in a file by me the night before the election and sent to the moderators. So that morning, the file will be ready for you, okay? And you can start marking on those blue A's as the day progresses, okay? And then we may not have to because of the way the laws have changed, and we may not be counting all the ballots on all the absentee ballots on election day, but depending upon how the flow goes, we may also, as Ms. King was pointing out, deliver more sheets to you. But it's not a game of telephone anymore. We used to call the polling places, et cetera. We literally will deliver you printouts in street order for you to mark off in your book.
Sounds good, thank you.
Sure. All right, other questions?
No, it's bedtime.
All right. Well, if you don't have more questions, you have the opportunity to think about them for the next week, and maybe we'll see some of you at 7 p.m. next week for our Q&A. All right? And
Right.
with that, I wish everybody a good night. Mary as well.
Okay, thanks, Fred.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you, Fred.
All right. Have a
Fred,
good night.
Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Night, night, thank you.
Bye-bye. Good night.
Bye, bye.
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 Thank you.